LaGrand and Brandon Davis, the Managing Director of the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability and the Office of Equity and Engagement. But first, let's go over some of the latest updates from around Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids City Manager Mark Washington unveiled a proposed $735 million budget for fiscal year 2026, marking a 6.5% increase over the previous year. Public hearings are scheduled for May 13, with a final City Commission vote expected later this month. To learn more about the proposed changes, read more on therapidian.org. The Grand Rapids City Commission has approved a plan to reduce the city's voting precincts, aiming to adapt to increase absentee voting and enhance accessibility for voters with disabilities. City Clerk Joel Hondorp emphasized that the changes are designed to improve efficiency while ensuring all residents maintain access to in-person voting options. The decision has sparked public debate, with some community members expressing concerns about potential impacts in voter access and representation. City Comptroller Max France appointed Desiree Kirkland last month to serve as the City of Grand Rapids' new Deputy Comptroller. Kirkland, who previously served as the Finance Director for the City of Lansing, will now oversee the city's financial operations. The trial of former Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schur, charged with second-degree murder in the 2022 shooting death of Patrick Lyoya, has entered its second week. Schur testified that he feared for his life during a struggle in which Lyoya allegedly gained control of his taser. Prosecutors argue the use of deadly force was excessive, noting the taser had already been discharged and Lyoya was face down when shot. Today, May 5, the jury has begun deliberations to determine whether Schur's actions were legally justified. Judge Christina Mims gave the jurors the option to consider involuntary manslaughter as a possible verdict, which is a lesser charge that carries a 15-year max sentence. The jurors must come to a unanimous decision, and this story is ongoing, so make sure to watch local news to keep up with the latest. For a 10th year, the City of Grand Rapids is offering free outdoor fitness classes throughout the summer. The 16 fitness classes will run weekly from May 12 to August 22, Monday through Friday. For more details and a list of classes offered, visit the city's website. The City of Grand Rapids is gathering public input on a proposed single hauler program, which would shift the sole responsibility of refuse collection onto the City of Grand Rapids, according to the public input page. This change was recommended to reduce wear and tear on local roads, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and ensure every residential property has trash and recycling services. A community survey is available on the city's website and will be open through August. Upcoming neighborhood events: the 2025 Grand Rapids Neighborhood Summit will take place from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday, May 17 at GVSU's Pew campus. This event will include a keynote presentation, multiple workshop options, lunch, and interactive activities. The theme this year is Bridging Differences and Building Unity. West Fest, a family-friendly carnival, is coming to the west side neighborhoods of Grand Rapids at John Ball Park on Friday, May 16. And for neighbors in the Creston neighborhood, the Creston Pancake Brunch and Street Party is also coming up on Friday, May 16. Brunch will be served inside Res Lounge, and the Street Party will be located outside on Spencer between Plainfield and Buffalo. The city and GRPS launched the Grand Canoe Experience for over 1,000 students. They launched this program coming up for this week, or next week, no, this week, an outdoor initiative offering over 1,000 students the chance to canoe the Grand River at Riverside Park. From May 5 through 9, this program aims to connect students with local waterways and promote environmental education. And more good summer news, as part of a new outdoor pool season pass program, Grand Rapids residents who are 17 years old and under can receive free pool access if they are registered by June 6th. More information about the program, the improved pass system, and the prices during the 2025 season can be found on the city's website. Grand Rapids has 3 public pools in the city at Briggs Park, Martin Luther King Park, and Richmond Park, and 15 splash pads. That's it for city updates. When we come back from the break, we will be joined by Grand Rapids Mayor David LaGrand and Brandon Davis, the Managing Director of the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability and the Office of Equity and Engagement.
For over 30 years after humble beginnings as a public access TV station, the Community Media Center has grown to be an active, multi-platform media and technology assistance organization, encouraging and enabling our community to push their creative boundaries. We power a variety of resources, including a music-centered community radio station, WYCE, a community venue with stage and screen at Wealthy Theater, citizen-driven journalism with the Rapidian, a web development team empowering local nonprofits, an education department that trains and broadens students' minds, and a free speech public access television studio, GRTV, where it all began. By introducing audiences to new voices and ideas, we enhance community engagement and create connections between artists and audiences, enriching our city's cultural offerings. We empower and collaborate with platforms and resources accessible to all and used by all. Every free democratic society depends on media, accessible to the community and uncensored by government. The Community Media Center continues this work for the media landscape of today and tomorrow. These platforms and services empower our neighbors to tell their stories and explore the richness of culture that Grand Rapids has to offer. Connect, discover, learn, create, and share. The Grand Rapids Community Media Center.
Water, like we spend lots of money for a water system that works.
Welcome back to City Connection. I'm your host, Allison Donahue, joined by Mayor David LaGrand and Brandon Davis, the Managing Director of the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability and the Office of Equity and Engagement, to continue the conversation. Welcome, both of you, to City Connection. Do you have to say that every time you introduce yourself?
Every time.
It is a long title.
It's
I don't know if I'll be able to.
I just go with Brandon, it works.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
You should just find an acronym that has STUFF in it. You're the director of stuff.
So you're new to managing both of these offices, but you're not necessarily new to this space and these offices.
Sure.
Can you give us, and the listeners at home, viewers at home, who might be unfamiliar with your work, but your background on how you ended up here leading this office,
Sure.
these offices?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having us. I'm excited to be here today. By way of background, I am an attorney. I came to the city of Grand Rapids after working as a criminal prosecutor for the majority of my career. So I'm originally from Detroit. I worked as a prosecutor in the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and then moved to West Michigan to work in the Muskegon County Prosecutor's Office, where I tried mostly homicides, armed robberies, serious felony cases. And transitioned to working in the city of Grand Rapids when I was recruited to come do some labor relations work. And I thought it would be an interesting time for a change in my career and to experience something different. Soon after that was in 2018. So soon after coming to labor relations for the city manager Mark Washington started at the city of Grand Rapids, and he was very interested in a concept called an oversight office because he come from Austin where there was an oversight office, and there also been a request here in the city for an oversight office. So after working in labor relations for a little while, I began the process of building our oversight office here in the city of Grand Rapids, and I've done that since its inception, and it's been amazing work. Last year, I was given the opportunity to take on our equity office as well, so now I have the privilege of leading both offices.
Great. Great. So can you help folks at home understand a little bit more about what your job entails? What part of your job would the public most recognize?
Okay, so I'll talk about the offices in this way. The Office of Oversight and Public Accountability was created to increase accountability and transparency in our public safety departments. Most of the time when people think of OPA, they think about the work in the police department side of what's happening. When we talk about OPA, there is 4 main elements. There's change, accountability, restorative justice, and empowerment and engagement. So when we talk change, we're talking about policy, right? We're looking at policies, recognizing that policies were created before many of us were sitting here, right? Before I was probably born, right? Like there were policies that were in place. So we go back and look at those policies with an eye for equity. We say, are these policies equitable? Are they necessary? And are they doing what we intend for them to do? So it's that change part of our work. Accountability looks at the individual actions of officers or of the police department, and we compare that to our policies in conjunction with the work that's done in internal affairs. Restorative justice looks at the harm that's been caused to community by the criminal justice system. Oftentimes I talk about the war on drugs and just the inequitable outcomes that came from out of that. So we do work like expungement work, which of course the mayor helped us to get to a place where we could even do it, but expungement work and things of that nature that we move forward with. And I'm moving real fast for time, but then we have, that empowerment and engagement space. And that's where we say, who's helping community understand the law and the system? I often talk about a law resisting and obstructing a police officer. And I think most people, my mom, for instance, right? For example, she thinks of that as like running away from an officer. And that's part of it. But that's not all of it. If an officer gives you a lawful order and you fail to obey it, that's resisting and obstructing, and it's punishable by up to 2 years in prison. Who's teaching community that? Mm-hmm. How do they understand that and know how to navigate? So that's really the work of our Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. On the equity side, we're working to embed equity into all city operations. That means that we recognize that, and I'm so grateful to work in a city that still understands that we don't all start off at the same space. We want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive, and that's what the work is all about.
Great, great. And I know City Connection viewers are familiar with you, Mayor. But I want to give you both a chance to answer this question so they can kind of understand a little bit more about who you both are. What does forward momentum look like to both of you in terms of equity, engagement, and accountability here in Grand Rapids?
Well, it's funny. It's great. And I'm so glad we got Brandon working at the city. And those themes that he talked about are things that I've actually been working on for decades. And so long before I got engaged in being a mayor, and really one of the reasons I got into public service in general is because when you look at our criminal justice system in America and what it does, a lot of the things it doesn't do very well. And so if all of us want public safety, which we do, a lot of the things we do are actually counterproductive. And so just to take a single example, like the work that I did on really broadening up expungement opportunities in the state, and crazy, but the bills that I wrote have helped like over 1 million people get their records cleaned up. Well, if someone hasn't had involvement in the justice system for 5 years, if they've been minding their own business and not getting in any police contact, why do we need to be so concerned about whether they had a misdemeanor when they were 19? We probably don't. And all that all keeping track of that does is give barriers to employment, give barriers to housing, all that kind of stuff. So our ability to build a more just system there and give people opportunities, it actually gives us a safer society. And so clearing some of the deadwood and asking yourselves, why do we do this stuff? What are there better options? Is frankly sort of the work of my life. And decades ago, I started getting involved in the restorative justice space. And so I love talking about this so much. I'm so passionate about it. So let me just explain to the audience what restorative justice means. So what restorative justice, and it came out of the Mennonite tradition. And some Mennonites asked, like, okay, in our justice system, what are we really doing? And they said it can kind of boil down to two things. We ask, who is guilty and how can we punish them? And they said a better question would be, who's hurt and how can we heal the hurt? And so if you ask who's hurt and how can we heal the hurt, you end up with a completely different agenda. It's a community building agenda, right? It's a success-based and a forward-looking agenda. So that's the answer to the forward-based, right? Like if we're looking at like, what did David LaGrand do yesterday and how can we punish him for it? It's not really forward-looking, right? It's trying to take that thing in the past, and so often I really resist talking about people as ex-offenders, and I really don't like talking. If anybody ever says that person X, Y, or Z is a criminal, it really, really sets off a lot of triggers for me, because like defining somebody by like maybe the worst 5 or 10 minutes of their life, none of us would want to be defined that way, right? And so, like, I wouldn't want to be defined by the worst 5 minutes of my life. And there are lots of things that, you know, there are lots of things that we can do for 5 or 10 minutes that are bad, and like we can be really good, productive, moral agents all the rest of our lives, right? And we don't want that one thing to follow us around for the rest of our lives. We also don't want it to define us in ways that have consequences that just aren't helpful for building a society where we all respect each other, build each other up, treat each other positively. So like, again, so this ties into what I've been saying as mayor a lot, which is we need to build a Grand Rapids where we're lifting each other up, where every day what we do in our work, in the community, whatever it is making all of us stronger. It's not a question of like, I have to push Brandon down so I can get raised up, right? Like, we can all get raised up together. That's absolutely true. And so we need to build a justice system that focuses on problem solving, peacekeeping, community safety, and not on shaming and blaming. Because it turns out shame and blame doesn't really get you where we want to go. If that's the emphasis of your justice system, it's the wrong system.
You both mentioned expungement. Just a few days ago, the annual expungement fair happened.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about this opportunity? What happened there?
I'd love to, and I'm going to cough now, which is great while you're on TV, right?
Yep.
Excuse me. So I tell everyone, the expungement fair is probably my favorite day of work every year. Probably the combination of the expungement fair and neighborhood summit, shameless plug, which is coming up on May 17th, are my favorite days working for the city. It's a good month.
Yeah.
Love coming to work. Here's why. The expungement fair is an opportunity for us to come together and help people turn their lives around. And that's really what it is. It's about giving people a fresh start when they've already paid their debt to society and they're in a place where they're saying, I want to do better. I usually tell a story about a mother I sat down with a few years ago at the expungement fair. And, you know, for me, sitting down doing the expungement, it's an exciting time, but it becomes repetitive. I'm looking at a criminal record to see if someone's eligible, and it had been a long day. By the time I got to this person, I'm just kind of like looking through it. I'm like, oh, great, you're eligible. And I'm starting to fill out the paperwork, and I look up, and this mother is bawling, like can't pull herself together. And she said, for the first time, I feel like I'm going to be able to be a good mother to my children. And she began to tell me her story about how they had housing that wasn't stable and employment wasn't stable, and she felt like this was the changing point. And this year I had a similar experience. We were doing the expungement fair, and one of the volunteers was having such an amazing time there, right? And so I was enjoying her energy. We're just having a good time. And, you know, I didn't recognize her. She stopped me and she said, you know, last year I was here as someone getting an expungement. And it was such a powerful moment in my life that I had to become a volunteer. And it set me back, right? This is the reason we do the work. It's because we know that we're able to help people get to a new place, stable employment, stable housing, and then it's a generational change because statistically, when someone has a criminal record, it's more likely that their children will, and their children's children will. So by helping someone get an expungement, we're breaking cycles and pushing people forward.
And my favorite statistic on this, when you clean up somebody's criminal history, their income statistically goes up 24% overnight, and it stays up for the rest of their earning
rest of
careers.
their lives.
So it's a huge anti-poverty thing. And so folks out there, hear me, so you know, in about 5 years ago, I worked on all these laws, but we are now in a space where a lot of new stuff is eligible for expungement that wasn't before. So if you wonder, come to the expungement fair, because there's a lot of opportunity for us to help people move on with their lives and be part of the community.
Yeah, so
really
even now,
exciting.
we're helping year round. So even outside of the expungement fair, feel free to contact the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. You can do that a few ways. You can email us at opa@grcity.us. You see how easy that is? opa@grcity.us. Or you can call 311 and ask for OPA, and they will transfer you directly to us, and we would love to help you through the process.
Great, great. Another question, are there current concerns at the local level? You work with diversity and equity efforts. Concerns at the local level because of decisions being made at the federal level in the Trump administration to restrict funding to diversity and equity efforts. I don't know if this is...
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. As a public administrator, I try to say apolitical as much as possible, but I will say this. I'm grateful to work for a city where our values haven't changed. And the city of Grand Rapids is still committed to embedding equity into all city operations. The city of Grand Rapids understands that we're in a space where we want all of our community members to thrive. We want to make sure that all of our businesses are doing well. We want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to do what their hearts desires. And thanks to the mayor and our city commission and our great city manager, we're able to still do this work. So I'm focused on the work and I'm focused on moving it forward. And I'm grateful that we're still able to do that.
And the other thing I will say to viewers, because it's true, like it's a stressful time and you hear these headlines and there's this fear going around, and I think a lot of actions are taken to make people afraid. And so I have a lot of people ask, the good news is our city is solid. We are committed to the things we are doing. We are not changing course, and we are not going to have to shut down anything that I know of as we're having this conversation. We're always looking at things. We have no plans to shut down any of our great city work because of things happening at the federal state level. Not a single plan to stop doing the things that we are doing. So we are just as committed to all of it. Now, as a community, are we going to maybe have to rise up and shoulder some extra work? Absolutely. But here's the other thing to remember. Like, when you're blessed, if you're in a good position, you should start with realizing that and then moving into empathy, because we are in a city that is thriving. There is so much opportunity that we can work better at sharing, right? Like, not everybody is sharing equally the opportunity, but by and large, Grand Rapids is doing well. We're a city that's prospering. And so many of us have very good lives and a lot of ability to help other people. And we can do that whether or not the federal government decides to stop helping on some of this stuff, whether or not the state wants to stop helping on this. So like our work on affordable housing, that doesn't depend on anything the federal government's doing. Like, that's important work we can do now. Our work on justice and policing, we're not depending on federal dollars or the federal government to act on that. We're not waiting for the state to act on things like, better police training, all of those things, the major projects that we're concerned on, whether they're justice issues, economic issues, neighborhood thriving issues. I am not aware of a single thing that we are thinking, gee, do we maybe have to stop doing this? No. So you can be worried about the federal government, but I'd advise everybody spend a little less time watching the news feed on what's going on in DC, because you can't do much about it. What you can do is lean into the work we're doing in the city, and you can come join us. You can contact OPA. You can come to a Mayor's Mondays. I'm leaving here to go to that after this. Every Monday night, we talk about these issues. The schedule's up on mayorsmondays.com. Like, we can build a community where we live with each other, we love each other, and we support each other right here, whatever's going on in DC, and we are committed to it.
Shameless plug, if you're interested in hyper-local issues, you can also become a Rapidian reporter and
Right on.
write about it. So one of the topics that folks are really tuned into right now, and it's an ongoing trial, so I'm assuming what you're able to share is limited, but is the trial regarding former GRPD officer Christopher Schur. I know the trial's ongoing. Is there any information either of you are able to share about the trial, the timeline, next steps?
I will share, I think the most important thing for people to remember, because sometimes the media can distort people's understanding of things. And I think you said earlier what's exactly right, but it's really important for people to take a breath, take a step back and realize a jury being empowered in this situation to make a decision is one of the most powerful examples of democracy I know of. So 12 random members of our community, like nobody put them on there on purpose. They are there at random, and they are not the government. They're not the prosecutor, they're not the city, they're not the federal government. It's not a judge making a decision, it's not a prosecutor or a defense attorney or whatever. It's 12 members of the community that are there at random. Nobody selected them there, nobody had any kind of quota system for who's there. It is random members of the community, and they are sworn to look at the evidence and apply their decision to it. So so what I keep saying over and over again is, like, first of all, I'm not going to comment on things because that's not my job. It's the job of the jury to apply their judgment to the evidence. But as far as the rest of the community goes, it's so important to respect the integrity of that process, because the alternative is tyranny. I mean, it's the most powerful anti-government tyranny thing I know of in Western civilization, is the power of the jury. And but what that means is they are going to come to a decision, and we, the community, are going to have to respect that and respect that process.
My follow-up on that, are there any plans to work with the community in the aftermath of this trial, regardless of what the outcome of it is?
Of course. I think any verdict is going to leave some people wondering. Whatever the verdict is, there inevitably, it's a little bit like an election. There's some people on both sides of anything. And so there's going to have to be some education. But the other thing I say to the community all the time is, what happens in that trial is up to the jury. What happens next week, that's on all of us, because there are things we can do to do justice better in our community. And Brandon touched on some of them, but our policies, those are our community decision. That's our values going forward. Our hiring, that is our community values going forward. Policing culture, that is our community values going forward. And so the leadership we have working in those areas, they need to engage, hear from the community, and they're out there asking. So our police chief is engaging, Brandon's engaging, I'm trying to engage. So what happens tomorrow, that's on all of us, right? What happened in the past, that's another issue. But going forward, we absolutely have to work as a community to commit to a community that truly focuses on and values justice. And we're going to do that.
Great. We're running out of time before we have to take a break to take questions from the public. But are there any current initiatives or efforts around policing or justice that you would like to uplift in the next 30 to 45 seconds?
You want to go?
Sure.
I got a million, but go ahead.
I think
You
there's
take
lots
it.
of great work going on in the city of Grand Rapids, both by the city and also by community partners. I'm super excited about the work that's going on with a Just GR, which is a project that's really doing some mapping, right? Some justice mapping across our community. When we're looking at that for and at the intersectionality of what happens in the justice system in order to be able to make decisions about the best ways to do justice. So that's really exciting work to me. I'm excited about the work that our police department is doing, moving back and moving forward towards some community policing, right? Those are things the community has been asking for, and as they continue to staff up, they're able to begin to move in that direction again. So I'm excited about that. And of course, the work that's going on at OPA, right? We are involved in Know Your Rights training, youth programs. We're working with nonviolence work across the city. That's great work that's helping to make Grand Rapids continue to be such an amazing city.
Perfect. Well, it's time now for us to take another break. So when we return, we will be answering questions from viewers like you. To take part in the conversation, send in a question to cityconnection@grcmc.org or submit a question through the Rapidian's Instagram story @The Rapidian. Welcome back to City Connection. It's May 5, 2025, and we're joined by Mayor David LaGrand and Brandon Davis, the Managing Director of the Office of Public Oversight and Public Accountability and the Office of Equity and Engagement.
Just Brandon.
Just Brandon. During this part of the show, we'll be taking questions from viewers, starting with a question from Reddit from Pretty Chill 4. How does the city view its LGBTQ community, and what, if any, measures will they take to continue to support and defend them from potential harassment or discrimination? Whoever feels most compelled.
I think that's a great question. The city of Grand Rapids respects all of our community members, every community member without regard for what their sexual orientation is or anything like that. We honor and respect them. We also go further to say that we want people to feel protected. We do not tolerate harassment in any way, and that's harassment against anyone. Our human rights ordinance is specifically designed. It's a first of its kind human rights ordinance, but our human rights ordinance specifically has protections for individuals who are being discriminated against based on their sexual orientation or race and ethnicity, and we'll continue to move forward with that.
Another question from Reddit. Rude Matthew says, why are the flock safety cameras I'm seeing in city limits excluded from OPA reporting?
I'm not familiar with the term flock safety camera, so it's difficult to respond to. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question because I'm not familiar with that term.
Now, I will say, we have body cams on our cameras, and those are all part of our, those are all, information that's available to Brandon's office, to investigations in general. And so, we've done a really robust move forward towards making all of our policing more transparent and accountable.
When we talk about cameras in general, if a camera is specifically designed or placed to record a city building, and I'm not sure if that's what they're speaking to, that is excluded from our surveillance policy, meaning that cameras that are just protecting city infrastructure, think about having a camera facing your home, right? And you're just protecting your house. Well, there's no surveillance policy about protecting your house. So if there was a camera that's just looking at a city building or city infrastructure, if that's what you're referring to, well, those are excluded for that reason. But when we're talking about surveilling people, those things are included in most situations in our surveillance policy.
Question from ChemMan1102 on Reddit. Unlike other city departments, the Grand Rapids City Charter requires that a minimum of 32% of the general operating fund go to funding the police. Why is this 32% floor necessary for policing? Shouldn't the police negotiate their budget like every other city department?
So a little bit of history here. That's in the city charter because there was a movement, and there was a petition made, and it was a ballot initiative, and it got passed. So the answer is, why is that different? It's because the voters made that change to the city charter. So we have to operate within the city charter. Now there could be a ballot initiative by the community to undo that, to modify it. That could happen tomorrow, and then we'd abide by a new city charter. It's a reasonable question to ask, why earmark a big chunk of the budget specifically for one department? Now, I will say that there are other things that you can potentially fit inside that basket. And so I think one of the things that Brandon and I talk about a lot is, when we say policing, I think a better thing to talk about is public safety. And public safety, there's lots of things you can do besides simple police response. That's necessary in some situations, but there's lots of situations where there are other productive things you can do which cost money. So one exciting thing that we've started to do is what we call co-response, and that's where if there's a mental health call and we think that there's a need to have someone with some mental health background, they can go along with a police officer to a call. That's a great thing. The other thing is there may be some calls where you don't need the police at all, where there's a legitimate mental health thing going on, but we don't think that there's a need for, to keep the community safe from that person. It's more like you need to help that person get the resources they need to deal with their mental, they may be acting out, they may be walking around in the middle of the street, but that doesn't mean they're in danger as much as there's somebody that needs help. So simply having a response that doesn't involve police at all is still public safety, in the sense that we're trying to keep that person who's wandering around in the middle of the street safe, right? We don't want them run over. We don't want them. And so all of those things we're really starting in the last 10 or 15 years to have really good conversations nationwide around, what do we mean? And what do we want? And if we want public safety and we want everybody in our community to be cared for, which are the goals I think all of us pretty much want, it doesn't always have to involve policing, right? Policing is a piece of the puzzle. And there's an old joke about this, which a lot of people have probably heard, which is, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we want other tools in our toolbox besides policing. It's not to say we don't need police, of course we do, but we can productively and creatively ask, are they the best response for this problem? Are they the best response in this situation? And then if you dig back further, questions about can you interrupt cycles of violence before you get to anything that you need any kind of response to? And that's where, for example, groups like Cure Violence are saying, look, if you think about, let's say Brandon and I are mad at each other, right? And we have some kind of beef and we have some kind of altercation. Well, maybe when we're done with that, we're still mad at each other. So maybe something's going to happen next week. Well, if you can think all right, statistically, we know that if people got really, really mad at each other this week, we better keep an eye on, let's make sure that they don't get mad at each other next week. Well, that's a violence intervention strategy, and that's not something that police are really best equipped to deal with, right? That sounds more like having us work out our grievances. So to a couple lawyers, that kind of sounds like mediation, right? And so a lot of community-based responses can be incredibly productive and valuable. And the best response to a crime is to stop it happening in the first place. The best response to anything traumatic or negative is to not even have it happen. So building a world where we reduce the incidence of those things happening that we have to have police respond to. No police officers happy to be responding to a shots fired call, right? They would be happier to live in a world where that shot didn't get fired. So, we're not talking about anything versus police. These are all things that good police departments are leaning in on, saying, hallelujah, like let's build a community that's got less violence in it, that's got better responses, that's got all of these tools. So like forward-looking leaders like Chief Winstrom, who's a great police chief, and forward-looking people in the city we're all pulling in the same direction on this. Now, are we going to get to a world with zero unhappiness in it? Probably not. A world with zero crime? Probably not this week. But like the goal should be a community with zero crime and a community where we all have the tools, the kind of tools we teach our kids. I'm sorry, this is a long answer, but like we don't, when we're dealing with our kids and teaching them like that wasn't the right thing to do, we don't use shame and blame most of the time. We don't tell them get out of the house and never want to see you again. We don't reject our kids, right? So when I talk about how we do justice better in the community, it looks a lot like good parenting. And so intuitively, we all know, like, we don't kick our kids out. We don't shame them forever. We don't, rub their noses in it, right? Like, we want to show our kids that we love them and we want them to be part of the family. And so, like, we're all in a family together. That's where we need to be going. Now, sometimes you got to put your kids in timeout. It's true, but you don't do it in a way that makes them feel rejected, right? So it's a big conversation, and policing's only part of it.
Another question from Reddit, Grand Quiet 4082 on Reddit says, how are you ensuring no one in GR is losing their right of due process?
I think it's a tough question. And I understand the heart of the question. Due process is a constitutional right that I know the mayor and I both strongly believe in. As an attorney, the idea of due process is really ingrained in everything that I believe about how justice systems should work. But part of it is that we have a system of government where the branches of government are separate. And we talk about the due process part. There's part of that goes into police processes and things of that nature, but a lot of it is the court part of it where we don't operate exactly. And that separation of powers prevents me from going in and saying, this is how something works. I do have a good faith belief in our criminal justice system, though, and believe that due process is necessary.
Yeah, exactly the right word, though. Necessary, but not sufficient. Because what we all want is justice.
Yes.
And so when I lecture on restorative justice, sometimes I say, look, due process means doing the same thing to everybody. Now, if I went into a room and I stole $20 from everybody in the room, that'd be doing the same thing to everybody. It'd be a bad thing, right? So simply saying you're going to do uniformity in your justice system doesn't necessarily get you to just outcomes. So like that's one of the things I'm always challenging systems to do is say like, but is this just? Is this right?
Yeah.
Is this how we should be treating everybody? So don't just tell me you built a machine and we followed the rules, right? The real question is like, what are we getting to the right moral outcomes?
Right.
And like Brandon and I are both lawyers. In law school, you're not trained to ask what's the right moral result. You're kind of taught to work in the justice system like driving a car. Nobody asks when they're driving a car. Nobody asks, is a car a good idea? But like, and so in the justice system, you're like, did they follow due process? Did that person get arraigned on time? Did they get their speedy trial? Okay, but what if they shouldn't have been on trial in the first place? What if that was an unjust law? What if we, are doing selective prosecution and we're taking a group of people and we're putting them under way more scrutiny than other people? You can say that's due process, but so due process is a part, but it's not enough.
It's the minimum standard, right? Like that's the baseline. Due process is necessary for every person.
Right.
We could not have a system that functioned properly without due process.
Right, but our goal
Has to
is
be more
justice and equity. That is our goal.
Agreed.
So we got to never forget the dream.
Great. Well, we'll have more questions soon, but it's time for us now to take another break. When we return, we'll be taking more questions from the public.
It's morning in Grand Rapids. Do you know what's going on in your city? Stay informed about what's happening in your community with The Rapidian, your source for hyperlocal news and information. The Rapidian is a community-focused news source powered by local residents like you. Our volunteer writers and reporters create content that hits close to home about topics like local government, business, schools, events, and people. The Rapidian goes beyond the headlines to provide in-depth coverage of issues that affect Grand Rapids directly, so you can stay in the know. We aim to uplift the community by sharing positive, inspiring stories of growth, progress, and neighborhood pride. The Rapidian is your neighborhood newspaper for the digital age. Follow us on our website and social media to stay connected to your community. This is The Rapidian.
Welcome back to City Connection. We're joined by David LaGrand and Brandon.
There we go.
I won't give your full title this time to save some airtime. We're taking questions from the public. This first one comes from Jesse82083 on Reddit. The question is, I don't know if it's a question for the mayor or MDOT, but when are we going to update 131 to modern times?
Well, it's probably not a question for the mayor or Brandon, because that's controlled by the state and federal funding. I can tell you my dream on it. My dream would be to have the 131 look like Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. Like, our most beautiful thing in the city is our river, and we take this elevated highway and we run a bunch of trucks by it, and a whole bunch of noise and a whole bunch of pollution, and so there's a longer discussion here that Brandon and I are probably going to be able to, either one of us could answer this for you, but like when we built highways in the 50s, there was this terrible mistake we made, which was so many cities had a cross put right through their heart, and it had lots of negative effects, and historically it had lots of negative effects of displacement and all that, but we're dealing with it today, right? And so only a few cities were smart enough to say, no, why don't we do collars and go around the city? So like DC has got ring roads, and they don't have a highway running right past the White House. But like, you can, it's hard to be downtown and not be able to look out a window and see a highway running by, and highways produce a lot of stuff that I'm not a big fan of, and I'd really rather have the semi trucks running down on the M6 and not through my neighborhood. And nobody wants a semi truck running through the neighborhood when you get right down to it, certainly not at 70 miles an hour. So, any ideas anybody's got in the community for like getting rid of the 131 and getting it down to a surface road with no trucks on it, I am on board. I would love to see that happen.
But you might need to take it up with the state. Another question, this one's for the mayor from Reddit. Are you still running your sandbag and construction businesses out in Ottawa County?
So yeah, I always disclose. I've got lots of businesses, and so yes, I always disclose all of them. So somebody out there knows that when the high water mark came up, I did some work helping on erosion control. Lake Michigan's down, so no, I'm not doing that right now.
Gotcha.
And the other part of it was, do I still have a construction company? Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I was doing some construction work this weekend because I sometimes work, and I have some guys who work in the construction company, and it's not only in Ottawa County, but it doesn't do much work, and it's not really my center of gravity and my, my core concern. But yeah, and all of my other finances, by the way, and all my other interests are up on my website, because I've disclosed my finances years ago, probably 2010. I led the charge at the state level to have financial disclosure by state elected officials, and I'm really hoping that at the city level we can have all elected officials disclose their finances. So I'm working with my colleagues on a policy that will really let all of our citizens know where everybody's interest is, because there's no reason not to own a bakery, which I did, or own a construction company, or one of my colleagues owns a concrete company. Well, there's no shame in that. It's not bad that she owns a concrete company, but the voters deserve to know what things we're doing besides public service, because the two can interact, and if they interact badly, that's called a conflict. So you don't want somebody in government who's making money who's using their government position to do self-enrichment. And the most important, obvious way to stop that is to have disclosure. Now, number two way is to stop government officials from having control over charities. And that happens a lot, unfortunately, at the state level, that legislators have control over charities. And so I would love to have that stop at the state level, but I also want to have a ban on that at the city level. So that was a discussion about transparency, not really on our justice and policing topic, but.
Yeah, but a follow-up on that. So if an elected official does have a conflict of interest with a business and maybe something that's going before the city commission, they won't vote on it usually. Is that the one barrier?
So there are layers. So one thing is, there's a conflict, and then there's what you might call the appearance of a conflict. So like, would it look bad, right? So, for example, if you owned a steel girder company, and we were giving a bid on the amphitheater to a steel company, well, even if you're not bidding, it might look a little weird to be deciding who else would get money if those people are kind of in the space that you're in, right? Or let's say you're voting on a food truck ordinance, and you don't own a food truck, but you own a restaurant, and there's no plan to put one in front of the restaurant you own, but it's still kind of adjacent. Well, then the lowest thing you should do is say it. Be like, hey, I own a restaurant. I don't think it's in competition with the food trucks, but just so everybody knows, I own a restaurant. So that's the lowest level, say it, for the appearance. If you think you got a real conflict, if you really might make money from something, then for sure don't vote on it. The best thing is to not vote, but also not discuss it. So I own a distillery, and so at the state level, there was a question of like how Michigan grain being used in distilleries, whether there's some like protocol for that. Well, not only did I not vote on that, I did not talk to anybody at the state level. I didn't talk to any lobbyists. I didn't talk to any of my colleagues about it. Like, I just kept my mouth shut because I did not want to be anywhere near a discussion that